Welcome to Stories from the South. I'm your host, Larry Lee Roten. Stories from the South will present stories depicting life in the South. Each tale is written to touch the heart, lift the spirit, and sometimes tickle your funny bone with a dose of Southern humor. This is a cute story about a young boy's first business adventure. I hope you enjoy it. It's called Paper Anyone? This is a true story about an entrepreneur who decided to go into business for himself. This type of thing happens often, and many people start a successful business that pays off for years. However, this is not that kind of story. At 5 years old, I hadn't yet embarked on the formal journey of school education. In my world, mathematics and reading were still as foreign as distant lands on a map. However, this didn't mean numbers and words were absent from my life. They simply manifested in a manner that was practical in my young mind. The mathematics I understood was the kind that mattered most to me at that age. I had mastered the art of calculating the worth of a soda bottle. Every bottle discarded by others held a promise of 2 cents at Tig's grocery store. It was my first encounter with the power of numbers. If I found 3 bottles, I had 6 cents. I had learned that a nickel was a small treasure, promising the possibility of a cold soda, a candy bar, a bag of chips, or a handful of candies. I realized I needed 3 soda bottles to pay for such treats. Plus, I would have a penny left over. These practical math problems were not confined to paper or chalkboards. They were woven into the fabric of my daily adventures. I would wander through the project, peering into ditches, kicking clumps of grass, trying to spot and uncover the glint of glass. I was raised in a government project, and my family wasn't wealthy. But again, as I think about it, we weren't poor either. Well, at least we weren't dirt poor. Dad and Mom always had a roof over our heads, a warm place to sleep, and food on the table. However, during the summer, when we kids were out of school and running wild through the neighborhood, cold sodas, candy, chips, and peanuts were hard to come by. If we didn't find any soda bottles, or weren't lucky enough to actually find money lying on the ground, those luxuries weren't about to happen. That's where this story begins. I was playing one day when the paper boy came through the project, delivering his papers. I asked him what he was doing, and he told me all about paper routes. Wow, I thought, that's what I needed, a paper route. He told me there were no routes available in the project. There was only one, and he was the paper boy. I nodded, disappointed at the news. Then, as if a black cloud lifted, he said, "You can get papers and sell them to people not on my route." He glanced at the massive project. "There's a lot of people in here that don't take the paper." My mind kicked in gear. That's what I'll do. I'll go door to door selling newspapers. 2 days later, I was ready to start my business. I didn't want to start big, so I figured if I started small, my business would grow. I had 12 papers and began knocking on doors. It was at the fifth door that I encountered my first customer. A familiar face greeted me with a warm smile. "Hello, Larry," the man said. "What are you doing?" "I'm selling newspapers," I replied enthusiastically. "Do you want one?" "Sure," he answered without hesitation. "I'll get you the money." A moment later he returned and handed me a dime. "Surprised," I said. "They're only a nickel." "I know. The extra nickel is a tip," he explained. "A tip? What's a tip?" I asked. He chuckled. "It's extra money for bringing a paper to my door." I was thrilled. Not only had I sold my first paper, but I had also received a dime instead of a nickel. The unexpected money lifted my spirits, and an adrenaline rush coursed through my veins. Within the next hour, I managed to sell all 12 of my newspapers. Many customers gave me a tip. Some added a few pennies, while others offered me a whole dime. I went home with my pockets jingling with the change I'd made. My mind processed thought after thought as I scurried home. Man, I was in the money. I was only 5 years old, but I was making money hand over fist. Life was good. Sitting in the kitchen, I laid my money on the table. I scanned the coins, dimes, nickels, and pennies lay everywhere. I was a rich man. Mom came into the room and saw the money. "Where did you get that?" she asked. "Selling papers," I said. "Where—" A loud knock interrupted her as the sound echoed in the house. Mom went to answer the front door. I heard her talking, and she yelled, "Larry, come here." I had no more papers to sell, but I could take orders. I hurried toward the front door, anticipating another sale. "Did you sell Mr. Farmer a paper?" "Yes," I said, beaming. "He gave me a nickel tip." "Go get his money," Mom said. "Bring him a dime." I did, but I couldn't understand. I'd sold him a paper, and now he wanted his money back plus his tip. I was confused. He left, and I sat scanning my coins on the kitchen table. I had 87 cents earlier, but now I have 77 cents after giving Mr. Farmer his dime back. In my mind's eye, it was still a good day of business. Then my business world came crashing down. "Where did you get those papers?" Mom asked. "From Aunt Melissa, Grandmother, Aunt Jean, the Greens, and other friends. I got 12 of them," I told her. "I rolled them up really tight, just like the paper boy does." Mom laughed. She took my hand and we visited every customer I'd sold papers to. Most laughed and gladly accepted their money back. I'd made a fortune that day, and I'd lost it all within an hour afterwards. Once more, I was broke. Mom sat at the kitchen table with me. She could see my disappointment. "Honey," she said, "papers are printed daily. You sold our neighbors old newspapers, outdated, old news." I might have been 5, but I had been around. My brothers and I had heard of good news. That's when me or my brothers found a soda bottle that translated directly into 2 cents when returned to the store. The bad news, on the other hand, was when our search came up empty. However, in all my days, I'd never heard of old news. I didn't understand. After all, I couldn't read at the time. All I wanted was a nickel for each paper. The paper boy I'd spoken to never told me that they were dated. How was I to know? My dreams of being an entrepreneur came true, but the day my business soared, it came crashing down with a knock on the front door. Afterwards, I was broke. Man, was I disappointed. My dad came home and laughed after listening to Mom's story. "Tomorrow," he said, "when I come home, we'll go downtown and see about getting you set up to sell newspapers." The next day we did that. Dad promised the Times News that if they gave me 25 papers each Saturday, I could stand on the corner by the First National Bank and sell them. I was surprised that they agreed. Every Saturday, rain or shine, Dad would take me to town, and I'd sell newspapers on the corner until I sold out. I'd make 2 cents per paper, and every weekend I would make 50 cents plus tips. Yep, once again, old Larry was in the money. I was the wealthiest kid in the project for a couple of years. Eventually, we moved back to the country, and my business folded and died. I went from selling papers to planting tobacco, picking peppers, and helping with the hay. It did pay more than 50 cents a week. As I write this, I realize my earlier years of making money were remarkable. At the age of 5, selling papers taught me 2 things. One, if you're going to sell something, make sure you can read. That might come in handy. The second thing it taught me was not to sell outdated newspapers. It seemed people didn't like buying old news. Hope you enjoyed this story. Yep, that small boy was indeed me. I was thrilled to have made a ton of money at such a young age. However, it did teach me one thing. Money, as solid as it is, runs right through your hands. It's the hardest thing to hold on to. I hope you enjoyed this bizarre short story. Please give this story a thumbs up, share it with your friends, and subscribe to my channel. As always, thank you for visiting my channel.